Welcome, everybody, to the Cover 2 podcast. My name is Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And we are back this week after a week off last week. We're a little too busy to record last week, but we are back. We have plenty to talk about today, Jared. We're going to start with Cam Newton to the Patriots, but later on during this podcast, we will get into the MLB season starting. They announced it last week. We're not going to go over it starting necessarily, but we're going to go over the rules and regulations for this year, and we're also going to discuss a little bit the players that are deciding not to play. And then we will move into NBA news, and a lot of news coming out of the NBA. So much to talk about. Also, there's players not playing. You guys know that, widely reported. And then also some interesting news about positive tests for COVID coming up here. Training camp starts in a week, and we got people testing positive. So creating interesting narratives coming into the Orlando bubble for the NBA for sure. And the MLB is starting. They have their own issues. And but here's one thing that's not an issue, and that is Cameron Newton signing with the New England Patriots, a 1-year deal. By no means it is a max contract or anything like that. This is a full almost tryout for Cam Newton with one of the best franchises of the last 20 years. Jared Smith, what were your first thoughts when you saw that Newton was going to join Bill Belichick?
Well, first of all, you're wrong that it's not an issue. It is an issue. It's a really big issue, right? Because Patriots, who had one of the best dynasties of the last decade, all of a sudden lose Hall of Famer to be Tom Brady, the GOAT. Everyone knows it, right? They lose the MVP. And what does Bill Belichick do? He says, okay, I'm going to sit back. We're going to, quote unquote, lean on Jared Stidham to come in and take over the reins. And lo and behold, in his back pocket, he's got Cam Newton lined up. Another MVP. It's the first time actually in NFL history that we've had a team lose an MVP quarterback and then subsequently pick up an MVP quarterback in the same offseason. I'm upset. I'm not happy about it. I was waiting and so excited for the Patriots dynasty to finally end and to have another team reign in the AFC East, right? Because it's like the Patriots have won so much that they have now become the villain. And not that I was ever a Patriots fan, but now I root for them to lose. And with them now getting Cam Newton, who supposedly is 100% healthy, passed his physical, seems to be in great shape. If you've seen any of his Instagram videos or YouTube videos, he seems hungry. He seems motivated. And if he is anything close to the 2015 MVP Cam Newton, look out, because the Patriots defense is stacked. Now, on offense, they are a little weak as far as weapons go, but that's what Cam Newton can make up for. And I'm just, right now, I'm not happy because I think the Patriots will, they're going to get at least 10 wins. It's just inevitable. That's what they do. But Belichick does not lose. They don't have single digits. They always have double-digit wins. And they will more than likely contend, if not win, the AFC East once more, right? It was all about the Bills coming into this offseason and how they have the best roster and the best chance to dethrone the Patriots. And now the Patriots have basically taken the reins back again, just like that with Cam Newton signing. Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. I know there's a lot of people that I know and a lot of people on TV that surmised about this possibly happening simply because New England didn't have a real quarterback, right? Brian Hoyer, Jarrett Stidham. By no way are you going to look at that, one of those guys as your quarterback, and say, we're going to win a Super Bowl this year. You would be just extremely unrealistic or biased as a Patriots fan to say that. Now signing Cam Newton, you have a legitimate NFL starting quarterback. Now, we are going to get into the, at least I am, the history with Cam Newton as far as injuries and stats overall go, specifically injuries. But personally, I love the move by the Patriots themselves. I always hated the fact that they were saying they were going to have this giant quarterback competition. When you have a guy like Cam Newton out there as a free agent, why not sign that guy for what they ended up signing for $550,000? That's an MLB rookie contract they signed Cam Newton for. That's just a
we'll get
little
to
bit
that
more
in a minute.
than. Yeah. That's it's another interesting part of it, but they're getting a great deal on Cam. Yes, the offense is not as good as it has been the last couple of years. The defense is a good one. It is a top NFL defense. I love the move for the Patriots. As a person that is jealous of the Patriots' success, like you, I hate the move because it does make it more legitimate. And teams like the Bills and the Jets with Sam Darnold, I'm not going to put the Dolphins in there because it's unrealistic that they're going to make the playoffs or really make a ride to the Super Bowl. But yeah, it is a little disappointing as someone that doesn't like the Patriots that much that Cam Newton's on the team. But I am excited to see how this will work and, if Cam Newton can stay healthy for sure.
Listen, I will say this. The Patriots are the only NFL franchise that can offer Cam Newton a $7.5 million contract with $550,000 fully guaranteed. I don't care. If you're the Cleveland Browns, if you're the Seattle Seahawks, I'm just throwing out, random teams that were reportedly interested in Cam Newton. There is no way that Cam signs for such a small deal with any other organization or franchise. You want to know why? It's because of the Patriots' history, because of their winning history and the fact that they have championships to back up their talk. So Cam Newton is basically betting on himself, saying that this move was not about money. It's basically about saying, okay, let me prove to the other 31 teams in the league that I am healthy again. Cam's only 31 years old. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute, because yes, he's not a spring chicken. He's not, he's not Tua Tagovailoa, who is a young guy coming out of college, right? Who basically is in somewhat of the same boat. They both had major injuries, Tua and Cam Newton, and they both had to rehab in a very interesting offseason with coronavirus going and the fact that medical staffs have not been able to get their hands on these players. But yet Tua, right, gets drafted 5th overall by the Dolphins. So it's very interesting to me that he can get drafted and a team can have that much confidence in a quarterback who has not played a single down in the NFL. But yet it took this long for Cam Newton to get an opportunity, yet he's had a 10-year career, been an NFL MVP, and taken his team to the Super Bowl, right? And then he still only signs for a $7.5 million contract. So it's very interesting to me that it took so long, number one, for Cam to sign with a team, and that he is basically getting paid peanuts as compared to what he would normally get if he in another scenario.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I personally didn't think his contract would be that big, just considering the fact that it kind of seemed like he got left out during free agency. Like, you saw a lot of these contracts, even the Panthers go after and get Teddy Bridgewater and these guys that necessarily haven't proven themselves as starters, but don't have the injury history that Cam Newton has. So I didn't expect him to get paid that much. Yeah, he probably deserves more, but I'm going to bring this up. The injuries are why he's not going to get paid this much, because it is a risk to have Cam Newton as your quarterback. All the way back until 2016, he's been dealing with shoulder injuries, and then this past year, the Liz Frank injury, which is a foot-ankle type of injury. So, and when you look at those years, the Panthers have not really been a successful NFL team, and that is primarily due to Cam Newton not being healthy. Yes, 2015, when he was the healthiest, when he was in his 5th year in the NFL, he won the MVP, and the team was extremely close to winning a Super Bowl. But since then, it's been a disaster for Cam Newton. He's had, let me see this, I have this listed, six injury news segments in his career since March of 2016. Since the 2016 season. I'll just list them off for you right here. Newton, surgery on his throwing shoulder to repair a torn rotator cuff. That's March of 2017 after the 2016 season. Newton suffered significant shoulder injury from TJ Watt, November 2018. January 19, he gets the surgery for that shoulder surgery. Then he has the Liz Frank injury in September last year. The Panthers placed Newton on injured reserve after essentially he cost the team a couple of games, specifically the one on Thursday against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then December 2019, he gets the surgery for the Liz Frank injury, while also a lot of people still believing his shoulder was a bit messed up from his surgery. So, Jared, after listening to that, why should have the Patriots paid him a little more based on the injury history there and his statistics just not being there?
He's just 4 years removed from being an NFL MVP. He is 4 years removed from taking his team to the Super Bowl. He is fully healthy. He's been checked out by medical doctors. And the easiest answer to your question, he is by far talented quarterback on that roster. It is not even close.
I'll agree with that.
It is Cam Newton and everybody else, right?
I agree with that.
No disrespect to Brian Hoyer, no disrespect to Jared Stidham, but none of those quarterbacks can stand up to what Cam Newton has done. So by Cam Newton finally being healthy again, yes, I feel like he was undervalued. But like I said, I feel that he took that contract because it was the Patriots, because of their history and their winning pedigree, and the fact that Cam Newton is basically saying, okay, I'm going to put my ego to the side for a minute, right? I'm going to sacrifice money. I'm going to bet on myself, hope that I stay healthy for a season, right? Have a good year with the Patriots. And then next offseason, he will try to cash in again and get some type of, $100 million contract with another team. Because more than likely not the Patriots, because they're usually not willing to dish out that type of money. Doesn't matter who you are. Even Tom Brady in his tenure with the Patriots took multiple discounts in order to stay with the team. So I don't see the Patriots handing him a large contract after this season, but I guarantee that another team like the Browns, I can't really think of many others right now, but there will be other teams out there that will sign Cam for, mark my words, $100 million contract if he stays healthy, which I feel that he fully deserves because, like I said, he's still only 31 years old. If he was 37, 38, that up there like Drew Brees and Tom Brady, that's a whole nother conversation. But he can still play for another 10 years if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I'm saying. The staying healthy thing is the biggest problem here, and I think this does. I'll go back to why this is such a good decision by the Patriots, because they already were looking at Jarrett Stidham as a potential quarterback, so they're obviously happy with him. They have Brian Hoyer, who's used to the system, to at least try to win a couple games. There's obviously the rumors. This is all if Cam gets hurt. There's the rumors that they could technically tank for Trevor Lawrence, right? That would be a successful strategy for the Patriots, looking at how big of a prospect Trevor Lawrence is. So for the Patriots, this is a great move. For Cam, it's a better move than being a backup. And for him, I'm happy that he became the starter, or at least has a chance to become the starter. But like we're saying, he's going to become the starter unless his shoulder falls off during the off season, right? So he has a great opportunity. I am just afraid that a lot of these injuries have messed with his mechanics a bit. And also, here's another thing, Jared. I want to ask you this question too. So when you look at the Patriots offense, I know there's a lot of layers to it and they adjust more than any other team. But when you look at like specifically Tom Brady's stats in this in their system, he's in the 4,000s as far as yards during a year. Only a couple years has he been below 4,000 in his life as the Patriots quarterback. Cam Newton has only been above 4,000 yards his rookie year, and that was 4,050 yards, so barely even made it to 4,000. How do you think Cam Newton and Bill Belichick will gel, or specifically Josh McDaniels, will gel in that offense, looking at the fact that Newton's stats don't really produce like the Patriots' other quarterback, Tom Brady?
Right. Well, I think a great thing is that the Patriots offense is very versatile. It is fluid, right? There is room to change. And with Josh McDaniels specifically, if you remember back, his last head coaching job was in Denver. Who was his quarterback for a period of time?
Tim
right?
Tebow.
That'd be Tim Tebow. Right now, Tim Tebow and Cam Newton have somewhat of a similar skill set. They're both bigger quarterbacks, dual threat. They can run. Obviously, Cam Newton does have a better arm than Tim Tebow, but I can see Josh McDaniels incorporating some of those philosophies that he had in Denver with Cam Newton to try to bring out the best in him. if the Patriots think that Cam Newton is going to drop back and throw the ball 40 or 50 times like Tom Brady did, that is a recipe for disaster, right? That is not what Cam Newton does. Now, they also can't, in my opinion, I don't think they can sit there and coddle him and say, because of his recent injury history, that they can't run him at all, right? Because you're not using a strength of his. And you're basically devaluing the entire offense and making it easier for the defense. So I think you have to keep the defense on their toes by using Cam as a running threat, or at least as a decoy. So I will be very surprised if the Patriots don't take some of those Denver type offensive philosophies and incorporate those into their offense with Cam Newton. Now, like I said, because they don't have the real weapons on the outside, yes, you have Julian Edelman, you have N'Keal Harry, who they drafted in the first round last year. So it's not like they don't have any weapons. It's just, other than Julian Edelman, there's really no one that's a proven threat on the outside. So it is going to be on Cam Newton, on the offensive line, and on the running backs to really produce and bring this offense up. And the last thing I'll say before I give it back to you is, when Cam was in Carolina, Christian McCaffrey was his best friend, right? Christian McCaffrey is the do-it-all running back. He can not only run in between the tackles on the outside, but he's a great pass catcher. You want to know what the Patriots have? They have great pass-catching running backs. James White, Sony Michel, the list goes on. They have about 3 or 4 running backs that they continually rotate in and out. So I think that is going to be their bread and butter, is kind of dink and dunk, drop the ball off, get the ball out of Cam Newton's hands when he is passing, and when he's not dropping back, you'll use him as a dual threat running quarterback.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you look at the Patriots roster, like you were saying, there's a lot of wide receivers on this roster that I have never heard of, or very unproven. Marquise Lee, very unproven. N'Keal Harry, unproven at least of last year. Julian Edelman, obviously a beast, but he's getting older. He's not the same player he used to be. Mohamed Sanu, getting older as well. And Damiere Byrd played for the Cardinals last year, made a lot of big catches, but he'll be that fourth receiver option, maybe a little decoy kind of player. But yeah, so not the best talent at wide receiver. But when you look at his wide receivers, when they went to the Super Bowl and went 15-1, listen to these names, Jared. Brenton Burson, Corey Brown, Jericho Cottrey, Devin Funchess, Ted Ginn Jr., and Kevin Norwood. So
Ted Ginn Jr. and Devin Funchess, I believe, are the only 2 names out of that list that I have heard before.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Greg Olsen, big deal there.
Okay, Greg Olsen. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say that. Yeah.
Well, he's a tight end, and even the running back game was essentially led by Jonathan Stewart, who was a good running back. But so when you actually look at this Patriots roster, it is even a little bit better offensively when you look at it on paper than that Panthers 2015 team. That's why I'm saying all it really is Cam Newton being healthy, and I just hope that a lot of these injuries haven't messed with his mechanics. Right. And that's why I'm afraid in a 1-year trial, it might not be the best for Cam. But of course, I'm hoping for the best. That offensive line has gotten a little bit better. Isaiah Wynn will return. He tore his ACL last year. He was supposed to be a big part. So when you look at the Patriots, the fact that they made the playoffs and all that stuff last year with kind of their beat up roster and their lack of wide receivers, to get Cam Newton and improve the roster a little bit, this team in some ways actually looks like it might be better than last year's team.
So before we move on, because we're running short on time, I'm going to put you on the spot right now, right? Okay. Cam Newton stays healthy. First of all, the NFL plays its full regular season, right? There's no hiccups or anything like that. Cam Newton stays healthy. What is the Patriots' record, and do they make the playoffs?
Well, let me see. I'm going to pull up their schedule really quickly just because I feel like
okay. All right. Now, I will say that they do have one of the toughest schedules in the league this year.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, already
based off of last year's results.
I mean, the NFC East has gotten better. So, but you have to look at it like they're likely at least going to be 3-3, likely 4-2 against the NFC East, right? They tend to lose to Miami every year. The Bills the Bills are a legitimate good team. And the Jets are getting a little bit better, right? So you have to expect them not to just run the table, go 6-0. So I would expect, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, 4-2. Yeah, I mean, They have Seattle, they have Kansas City, San Francisco on this roster, Baltimore.
Ugh.
Jesus Christ. Improved Cardinals team, the Rams. So it's going to be tough. I mean, they won 10 games last year. I would say it's going to be around there. It's going to be around 9 to 10. It would be hard for me to say that they're going to not lose more than like 4 games because Baltimore, Kansas City, Seattle, Buffalo. I doubt they beat Buffalo twice. You have to run the NFC West schedule. Like, that's brutal. So, I would say, to be safe, I think best record they have is 10-6, realistically 9-7. But with the expanded
playoffs, is that
good
enough for a playoff spot?
Oh, I would assume it is, because I think they might end up being, second in the AFC East, and the AFC has tended to be a little worse lately than the NFC. So with the added playoff team, 7 spots. I think the Patriots do get in if Cam Newton is healthy, and that is the biggest if of all time.
I hope so. Listen, I'm in all of this. I'm rooting for Cam Newton. I've always been a fan of his. I hope that he can rejuvenate his career, show teams that he can stay healthy for a full season, right? Obviously, having Bill Belichick as your head coach and Josh McDaniels, who are obviously both Super Bowl winning coaches, is a good thing for him. So hopefully they can teach him some new tricks. Cam can have a good year, and then he can use this to catapult into a new contract potentially next offseason and continue his career for another 5 or 10 years, because he has that in him as long as he can stay healthy.
I totally agree with you. So one question I wanted to pose to you two, just really quickly. There was rumors, I can't remember where I heard this, and they just come off the top of my head, and I did a little research on this, that the Patriots did look into possibly signing Colin Kaepernick. I think to both of us, I think to both of us, it would make sense that they would sign Cam over Kaepernick. I can't imagine a reason why you would think that, besides the injury history, going with a guy that hasn't played for a couple of years, legitimately anything, over a guy that at least could like throw the ball injured. Like, I can't. Any thoughts to that? The fact that the Patriots looked into Colin Kaepernick?
Not going to happen. Never in a million years. I'm sorry. Cam Newton is out there. But he is not to the extreme that Colin Kaepernick has taken things. No, there is zero chance. I don't believe that Bill Belichick would want to deal with all of the media pressure with all of that. Owner Robert Kraft is obviously very close with the NFL commissioner and Roger Goodell. And Robert Kraft is also in with the president of the United States, who we all know how he feels about Colin Kaepernick. So even getting political, there are way too many reasons, unfortunately, why the Patriots would never even, in my opinion, attempt to sign Colin Kaepernick. There can be a story about it. There can be a potential rumor. I don't believe the smoke. Don't believe the hype. I would love for Colin Kaepernick to get back in the league, to obviously be able to show that he can still play. But from the Patriots, no chance in hell.
Yeah, and that's why it was interesting that I heard that rumor, because I'm like, number one, everything you just explained, the Patriots are aligned with not necessarily what you would consider Colin Kaepernick's message, or the people that are for his message are not the people associated with the Patriots. Not everybody, of course, but most of the important ones. Well, also, I mean, realistically, could you imagine Colin Kaepernick joining a team called the Patriots after what has happened? It would be an article in the Onion for sure, if that happens. So yeah, I agree with you. And after the fact that they've gotten behind Jared Smith, it doesn't seem realistic why they would go with a guy like Kaepernick if they're trying to develop a younger quarterback and go with Cam Newton. It doesn't make much sense. All right. So moving on, completely different sports, to the MLB. Jared, MLB season somehow is going to start this year. I don't know how it happened. I don't know what happened, but we're getting 60 games. It's starting around July 24th. We're getting Garrett Cole versus Max Scherzer in the first matchup of the year, apparently. Spring training is technically already underway, and players are getting paid 37% of their salaries based on the 60-game full pro rata. After hearing all that, what are your thoughts on the MLB season actually starting very, very soon?
I still just have a bad taste in my mouth. Is this really a win for either side? Like don't get me wrong. I'm happy that baseball is back. I'm happy that we will get sports back. Hopefully, right? Things are kind of going backwards in the world. A lot of, at least here in California where we live, a lot of restaurants have had to close down again, and things seem to be trending in the wrong direction. So hopefully we will have sports by the end of the month. But in saying all of that, with everything that has gone on, the back and forth for months between the MLB Players Association and Major League Baseball itself, how it has been, leaked and scrutinized that this has been about money and a power play by the owners against the players. Is it really a win for either side, right? I don't know at this point, right? Because I think Major League Baseball unfortunately lost some fans through all of this. If you weren't a diehard baseball fan, like yourself, and I'm a baseball fan as well, but if you're on the fence, maybe if you watched, a couple games or went to a couple games a year, but you weren't really an enthusiast, are you really going to, is all of this back and forth scrutiny and the fact that it took over 2 months for both sides to come together on an agreement over, money when many of these players are already millionaires and these owners are billionaires? I don't see how this is a good look for baseball. And who knows, hopefully within a couple weeks or a month, we can forget about all this and just focus on the games. But for right now, I'm still not excited. I don't have this like jump for joy moment of, oh yay, baseball is back, because I still have that back and forth of arguing over money, when in reality, it really shouldn't have gone that far.
Yeah. Oh, I completely agree with you that it's left a bad taste in my mouth. Just overall, the fact, obviously it's due to safety, but most of these sports returning without fans is going to be disappointing. I think we'll obviously get used to it. Like we've gotten used to watching golf without fans, watching NASCAR without fans, watching UFC. There's a lot of things that have, pleasantly surprised me, at least by the presentation of them, how normal they seemed, even though there was no fans. Obviously, we have not had any of the professional or the big four professional sports start: baseball, basketball, hockey, and football. And it's looking like baseball will likely be the first one. It will be interesting. Just a couple of other interesting nuggets here. If you are wondering, well, they didn't agree to anything, so why is the season starting? Well, what they did was they reverted back to a deal they made on March 26th, right when we were in the middle of the pandemic. Everyone's staying home. Everyone's hoarding toilet paper, right? This goes back way back. They agreed to the 37% full pro rata. However many games were going to get played, that was what they were going to get paid based on that percentage, which makes the most sense. Why would you get paid your full salary if you're only playing 100 games, right? Compared to 160. It doesn't make sense. Now they're playing 60. They're getting paid for 60 games. But what that did in turn was also, we're going to see the same playoff format that we have seen for the last couple of years. We don't get that extra 2 teams in. So, you talk about these 60 games, Jared, the importance of literally every single game should be at least a reason people should get excited about this. Is that if you're an Angels fan or you're a Dodgers fan or you're a Yankees fan, Red Sox fan, if your team goes on a 5-game slump, that could affect you making the playoffs. Legitimately. Normally during a regular season, unless you lost to your division leader 5 times in a row, you really wouldn't be affected by a cold stretch. Every team has a cold stretch. It's going to mean a lot. But yeah, so in this deal, there's a lot of things that we're missed out on. Obviously, the biggest thing is games. If they would have came to an agreement back in April, early April, the season would have already started. We would have seen 100 games and the players really got paid more. The only thing that has really happened now is the lack of games is the biggest problem from them not getting a deal done. According to ESPN, the likelihood of a player strike is very, very minimal. And from what it seems like just on social media and in general, players are excited to play. There are, of course, a couple players that will not play, and they've already confirmed, and there will be more players than that. But overall, the players seem to be excited about this. Other interesting information, Apparently, everyone's just playing in their home park, which is an interesting. There's no bubble.
A little
here.
Sandlot situation.
Yeah, there's no bubble here for the MLB. They're just essentially playing a season without fans and with rigorous testing. Like you mentioned, Jared, before we started the podcast, you said the MLB is testing every other day currently, correct?
Yes. Yeah, every other day, unless a player's temperature exceeds 100.4, then they'll be tested, like no matter what, they'll be tested every day and more than likely sent home and then put in the quarantine protocol, let's call it, of having to quarantine for at least 14 days. But other than that, every other day.
Yeah, you said 2 negative tests needs to be the thing, which we've heard in the UFC. I cover the professional wrestling world. At least the companies that are doing it correctly are doing the 2 negative tests. I would assume MLB has the best of tests too. Here are some other notes about the health and safety protocols that we may not have heard yet. Players and other team personnel not participating in the game would sit in the stands, separated by at least 6 feet, like the GM, scouts, all those kind of people. They're not allowed to just sit right next to each other. Same distancing standards to the what we, Jared, have to do as well, just as people commonly. No high fives, fist bumps, or hugs.
Yeah, see, that's going to be, listen, you hit like a game-winning home run or, I don't know, a diving catch or something like that. It's just going to be instinctive that you're going to want to go up and, support your teammate, dab them up, give them a chest bump, something like that. It's going to happen. I don't see how players are going to go 60 games without, I still walk up to people and just instinctively put my hand out to shake someone's hand, right? It's just, you want to just show respect. And so that's an interesting, that's an actual rule. What happens if, a teammate does give someone a high five?
That's a good question, Jared. I have no idea what's supposed to,
They take away a run, you get like a game suspension. I mean, how serious are we talking here?
I don't know, but listen to the rest of this, Jared. So no spitting, chewing of tobacco or sunflower seeds or any combination thereof, which would make a lot more sense because it's out of your mouth, right?
I understand.
That would make more sense. Still stupid and ridiculous.
Listen, you know what guys are going to do? Guys are just going to go down to the clubhouse, okay? They're going to go down to the clubhouse where there's no cameras, no one that can see them or spot them. And you're going to see a lot of guys in between innings. And they're going to be like, man, why are guys going to the dugout? They got to go to the bathroom 2-3 times during the game? No, it's because they're going to go down there. They're going to get their seeds. They're going to chew their gum, do whatever they got to do. And then when they're up to bat or when they're up to play defense, they're going to come back up. That's what's going to happen.
So there's also, God, this is hilarious, some of these rules. Minimal distance between base runners, fielders, and coaches and umpires is also encouraged as much as possible. So the MLB is expecting players just to distance from each other during the play of the game as well. A new ball will be thrown out once it has been, or a ball will be thrown out once it has been touched by multiple players. And post-game showers are discouraged. Legitimately in the 67-page document.
Let's go back to the in-play rule of players not being close to each other. So let's say you get a base hit and you're on first as the runner. You also have the first baseman that's right there covering the base. So does that mean that the runner has to purposely get a bigger lead from first base in order to stay away from the first baseman?
I would guess what this rule is there to prevent is fraternization on the field. We see a Jose Altuve and Aaron Judge talk to each other. See Albert Pujols and Miguel Cabrera. They talk to each other. They get close. I think what MLB is trying to do with this is not necessarily a rule. It's just a guideline of how to help. I think what they're more trying to do is, hey, let's not, let's just play baseball. Let's not do all the other stuff. Let's play baseball. Let's use the gloves.
It's a part of baseball. You're taking away
I'm
a
not
part of the game.
I'm just playing devil's advocate in a way of just explaining why.
Just saying.
Yeah. And then the ball thing makes sense as well. And here's the other thing, Jared. If they're all tested, why are all these what are these rules being enforced for if they are tested and tested negative the minute they walk into the door? Right? I didn't understand it with UFC splitting up all their announcers as well. Golfers not allowed to be super close. It's if you're all tested, what's the problem, right? At that point. So it's another argument for another day, and a lot of people there's a lot of things you could say could happen, obviously like that. But I was, I found it a little ridiculous during this whole COVID time that when people are tested and they're as safe as possible, why there's still these crazy guidelines for people that have been deemed safe, right? I guess it's a look thing.
I think it's baseball has to in order to cover themselves.
Of course, yeah.
In the case that a player wants to go after them for whatever reason, if they get the coronavirus, unfortunately, and then it spreads to their family and then something unfortunate happens, I think baseball and every other professional sport has to basically have these guidelines in place to cover themselves, to say, well, we came up with these, this is what we had in place before the players played, they signed off on it, all of that. It's just, it's a part of it, but you're right. Some of the intricacies are interesting, and the reasons behind some of those protocols are in question.
Well, yeah, and there's no more physically distancing sport than baseball, too. So to have all these other guidelines, I guess they have to pick and choose, right? Because the players are already separated naturally because of the game. So they're just saying, well, don't do all this other stuff. But Jared, I would not expect there to actually be penalties unless somebody is doing it so egregiously that it's kind of just, for example, someone not wearing a mask and throwing stuff all over a grocery store, like something ridiculous like that we've seen on social media. If a player is just absolutely not agreeing to stuff, then you could see someone get in trouble. But I would absolutely not expect there to be any enforcement on these little issues, as long as they're not stuff that is happening, daily and hourly during a game. Right.
Okay, here's a question for you. And this just popped in my head right now. So there's a base runner on second. Let's call it third. Call it third, right? The batter at the plate gets a base hit, and then there's basically a play at the plate. So the catcher gets the ball, and the runner that's on third heading for home, there's a collision, right? What happens then? Like, it's inevitable that at some point there is going to be some player contact, whether it's to that extreme or even just a tag out at first base, or maybe there's a runner going between first and second, right? And he's kind of in a pickle. There's going to inevitably be some type of contact between players, right? But you are correct. Between the four major sports, it is the least amount of contact, right? So we would hope that there would not be as many cases or as many opportunities for players to be touching each other or around each other.
Yeah, I think obviously you have to let them play the game. If the players were that concerned about collisions and all that stuff, because they will have. Anytime a player slides into a base, there's not contact, but they're directly right next to each other. You telling me two outfielders are going to run into each other at some point? A batter, a catcher, and an umpire are literally standing right next to each other in close proximity. So, yeah, I don't think anything like that. That there will be any actions taken to get rid of contact in the game, because at that point you're really affecting the game and in a negative way. But I just think a lot of these guidelines, like you said, are there almost politically to be, if they do get in trouble for some reason, or there's a huge epidemic in the sport of baseball as far as the coronavirus goes, that they look to it and go, okay, well, we put these rules out here and the players didn't agree to them, and they could maybe throw some blame. But I would say this is more of a political move rather than an actual real thing. And also, I think a lot of these rules were also put in, again, we've learned a lot of different things. We've learned that, based on touch, the coronavirus doesn't necessarily pass as much as we thought it was. We've heard of some positive tests and stuff not being true. Obviously, there's still a danger, and we have seen spikes, like you mentioned, here in California and a lot of the other states that open, but the coronavirus is somewhat a bit less dangerous in the form of the ways you can catch it. It seems like it's only really from mouth and other stuff, other fluids coming out of your body and stuff like that. So I think a lot of these guidelines were made when we didn't know a lot, and now they're just still implemented. But I would doubt the NBA would go into this. There's always rules in every sport too, just in general, that teams just don't, or that sports just don't enforce anymore, realistically. Think about holding in the NFL amongst offensive and defensive linemen. Like, you could call holding on every single play, but you're just not going to, because you realize that the sport's just played that way, right?
Okay, that's a good analogy. Yeah. I like that.
They're just a little bit like that, but yeah. Okay, and then the last thing we're going to talk about with baseball, we'll just go over this really quickly. There are 4 players that have said as of July 2nd, when we're recording this, that they said they're not going to play. Those 4 players are Mike Leake of the Diamondbacks. No mention of why he's not playing, but he was the first player reported to have withdrawn. I believe it was something to do with his family, but nothing specific. Ryan Zimmerman, who a lot of people thought would retire, he has not retired, but he said he cited family concerns in his decision to stay away. Admirable. Joe Ross, another Nationals player who was fighting for the 5th spot in that rotation, it would be a key player in the bullpen. He's not going to play. And Ian Desmond was the most interesting out of all of them. He listed many reasons, including his wife being pregnant, having multiple kids, and also social justice reasons relating to the Black Lives Matter movement that we heard a lot of NBA players discussing. Jared, what do you think about these specific players not playing this season? And do you think this is going to be, we are going to see a lot more or only a little bit more players actually not play?
I do feel that there will be more players coming out as the month goes on that will decide to not play. And for some of the same reasons that we've seen Ian Desmond and Ryan Zimmerman and Joe Ross decide to opt out of playing. Now, it is important to note that none of these players will be getting paid. They are also sacrificing their salary for the rest of the year, right? Yeah. So hopefully they've been able to save their money and already made money to be able to basically carry over. But I obviously can't fault any of these players, right? Whether your wife is pregnant, whether you have children, whether you are around your parents who may be elderly, whatever the case is, there almost is no wrong reason, right? If you are choosing not to play because you are not comfortable with being around other people and potentially getting the coronavirus, who is to stop you from saying that, right? These are grown adults who are choosing to make their own decisions, and it seems like it's in the best interest of their family. So obviously, yes, for each team, especially with the Nationals and Ryan Zimmerman and the Rockies with Ian Desmond, both of those players are major key pieces to those teams. So from a team standpoint, it will hurt them. But like I said, I can't fault any player, regardless of the sport, if they choose not to play and if they choose to stay home and be with their families.
Yeah, no, I can't blame anybody either, whether the reason makes sense or not. Now, Ian, I want to get back to Ian Desmond and just ask you a question personally about his message, because he has been the first player to come out for protest and political reasons relating to the Black Lives Matter movement and overall racism in the United States. Him citing one of the reasons why he's not going to play, he is a biracial person as well. Jared, he cited some, a lack of African Americans in the MLB. He cited hearing racism during games. We've heard, obviously, Adam Jones, Mookie Betts, other Black players come out and say that they've heard racism in certain parks. For you, Jared, being a Black man yourself, what do you see when you look at baseball as far as racism goes, or as far as the African American community in baseball?
First of all, I don't see baseball doing enough. I don't see baseball stepping up to the plate like the NBA does, which is a very progressive league, or even like the NFL, even though I don't necessarily, back what the NFL is saying with Roger Goodell coming out and certain, team presidents or general managers or even owners coming out and speaking. It's almost after the fact. And it took a video made by NFL players to get certain owners to actually come out and say something. So it was almost forced. It didn't feel natural. And Major League Baseball, we really haven't seen anything from owners or even the league. We've seen certain players come out and protest, or at least speak their minds and give their thoughts. But, when baseball, I just looked it up. There's only 68 African Americans in Major League Baseball as of today, which makes up 7.7% of the league. That is obviously a very small fraction. Yeah. And I feel because there's such a small percentage of African Americans in baseball, to me, it just doesn't seem like baseball feels like they need to come out and say something, right? It's not like the NBA or the NFL, where both of those leagues, there's easily over 50% made up of African Americans,
right?
So it is a huge jump in percentages. In baseball, I just feel that it is really upon the players to have to step up and do something, because I don't see any organizations themselves or Major League Baseball itself taking the initiative to want to step up and speak out and speak up for these players. So it's very unfortunate. And we've even seen, going back, kind of switching topics a little bit, with Torrey Hunter back when he played in the league, where he had a no trade specifically to the Boston Red Sox organization because of the amount of times that he had either been racially profiled, called certain names. He said in his contract, no matter what team he played for, whether it was the Minnesota Twins or the Angels, that he will not be traded and will not sign a contract with Boston specifically for those racial reasons. So baseball obviously does have a problem, but the concern for me is I haven't seen baseball take that initiative or take that step to want to fix the problem. Right now, all we've heard is unfortunate events that have happened. I haven't seen anyone from Major League Baseball organizations step up. And to me, that is one of the biggest issues.
Yeah, there definitely is when you hear 7.7 African-American players, 7.7% of the players are African-American. When you look at a lot of the other sports in the United States, NBA and NFL, primarily Black, right? Majority Black. And then you look at baseball at 7.7, it doesn't make much sense. Going to the Black manager discussion, since 1992, only 11 Black managers, period. Many overlapping as well. Like a guy like Dusty Baker being the manager of multiple teams.
You're telling me in 28 years, there have been only 11 managers in Major League Baseball?
That's just from 1992. It's just a quick stat I pulled up off the top of my head because I hadn't originally was going to ask this question. But yeah, at least from 1992, that's at least shocking enough. I can't imagine there was much before that, just considering the state of the United States in general, around African Americans being in high places. So, recently when we've been in the, quote unquote, least racist time, you could argue that clearly with what's been happening lately. But yes, we've had only 11 Black managers and many overlapping as well, the same ones being managers. So, yeah, it's very interesting. And I know certain teams have tried to get into the inner cities. I know the Dodgers have a whole facility in Compton. I've actually personally played at it before, where they try to bring people from the inner city in Los Angeles in. And I don't know if there's been any players specifically that have actually come from those spots to be drafted or make the major leagues. I do know there are certain teams making the effort to do that, but it isn't enough. And Ian Desmond himself, one of the reasons he even brought up the racial stuff is because he saw his old Little League park in Sarasota, Florida. It looked like crap and it hadn't been taken care of. And it was just another reason where you see, the systematic not caring about an African-American community there in that just Little League park. And it would make people not want to play. So, yeah, a lot to discuss there. We do need to move on. But, yeah, very interesting with Ian Desmond there, not necessarily citing safety reasons and many of the reasons he not want to play, but a lot of social justice reasons.
And I hope more people step up and back Ian Desmond.
I agree.
Whether it's for those specific reasons, but at least come to his aid and say, we are behind you. And like I said, it won't mean anything, but basically force Major League Baseball to have to step up and come out and say something. Because the fact that we have heard so minimal, if nothing at all, is a major problem, right?
Yeah.
Major problem that needs to be assessed. Whether they come up with somewhat of the NFL has the Rooney Rule, right, where each organization must interview a minority before making a final decision on their coaching decision or on who their coach is, whether it's a head coach, an assistant coach. Even though the Rooney Rule is not perfect, it almost seems like Major League Baseball needs to adopt some of those strategies in order to help get African Americans into those higher positions.
And clearly, too, African Americans have been the basis for some of the best players in Major League history. You look at Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, Willie McCovey, Barry Bonds. You can talk about the cheating all you want, but those were African American players that are regarded as some of the best, if not the best, baseball players ever. So clearly, African Americans have the knowledge to become managers, and that's where you have to look at it like, is there some sort of a racist angle coming from it. I think a lot of people would believe that, being at where the United States is generally corporately in general. But yeah, I mean, I look at it as like some of my favorite players have been black, and to tell me that they don't know how to coach a baseball team would be utterly ridiculous. All right, let's move into the NBA to finish out the podcast. We'll continue our discussions about players not playing just to kind of fluidly go into it. Jared, so far, I have a list of 8 players that have committed to not playing this season in the bubble. That is Trevor Ariza of the Trailblazers, Davis Bertan of the Wizards, Avery Bradley of the Lakers, Willie Cauley-Stein of the Mavericks, Wilson Chandler of the Nets, DeMarcus Cousins, who was released from the Lakers. It's more of a rehab decision. DeAndre Jordan of the Nets, and Thabo Sefolosha of the Rockets. Not all of those are for all the same reasons either. Your first thoughts, Jared, on just hearing that? And I personally believe we'll have a lot more NBA players that don't play this year.
Once again, not surprised, and I do feel that there will be more players that step up and kind of follow that same path, that will say, you know what, I'm going to take a step back. I'm not going to play, whether it is for specifically the coronavirus, or it is whether they're wanting to support social injustice and wanting to put more of their efforts into protesting, into trying to make things better for their communities. Which I cannot fault either way, right? You have certain players like LeBron James who is saying, it is better if we do have basketball and we can still help and support and show that we are here as well. There are other players, obviously, like Avery Bradley, amongst others, who are saying we don't want to play. We want to focus all of our time and energy into that aspect. So I don't think I wouldn't say that there's a wrong answer. As a fan, of course, I do want to see the NBA come back, and the NBA has already come out and saying that they're potentially talking about letting players have nicknames, or not necessarily nicknames, but not necessarily have their names on the back of their jerseys, have either Black Lives Matter or other names or other quotes in order to support the movement. So, like I said, the NBA, I would say, is by far the most progressive league when it comes to social injustice. And they're showing that by the types of moves that they're going to allow these players to make. So not surprising that there are players that are deciding not to play. And I think there will definitely be more before the end of the month comes. Because if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's July 24th or 25th when the season will technically get underway. So we're just
I don't have the exact
3 weeks.
I don't have the exact date, but yeah. So the interesting thing is, so training camp starts next week, a week from today. We'll see how that ends up going, but so I mean, and there's supposed to be 3 scrimmages in the middle of that before the season starts. But yeah, so we've already got more. For example, more players from the NBA, which has smaller rosters than baseball. More percentage of players not playing, and some key ones. Trevor Ariza not playing for the Trailblazers is huge. Avery Bradley not playing for the Lakers is huge. DeAndre Jordan is one of the best players on the Nets. Not that I think a lot of people expect him to go far because the lack of Kyrie and Kevin Durant, but still. And Thabo Sefolosha has been a defensive mastermind for the years in the NBA, and he leaves a team, the Rockets, that's defensively inept most of the year. So, there's a lot of interesting players also not playing in here. I'll bring this next topic up right here, is that we have now had 25 players test positive for the coronavirus in the last 2 weeks. 16 a week ago, 16 2 weeks ago, 9 this week. Also over that time, 10 staff members out of 884 staff members, 25 players out of 350. This also raises concerns or combines with the fact that a lot of players recently, Jared, have been voicing the fact that they doubt all the NBA players will stick to the bubble and stick to all the guidelines, and they may leave and do other things. What are your thoughts on all of that? The testing results, the positive tests, and the fact that NBA players themselves are admitting they might not stick to the bubble.
Right. Well, listen, we can't sit here and be naive, right? The NBA, basketball in itself, is a contact sport. You're sweating on each other. You're obviously touching each other when you're playing offense and defense. Someone posts up against you. You usually have your forearm or your arm on their back, right? There's multiple instances going up and down the court. Over 100 times a game, you're going to be in physical contact with another player, right? So that alone is a not good when it comes to the coronavirus. But what I will say, as far as the players in this particular bubble, with the 3 different hotels that these teams are going to be staying in. Now, listen, the NBA has come out and said that they're going to have, they're going to have bowling, and they're going to have all these different activities and things for these players to do. Who are they really trying to fool, right? These are athletes in their mid-20s into their 30s that want to go out and party on their off days. Right now, obviously, they might not be able to go out to a club, but you expect these millionaire athletes to sit in their hotel rooms and play pool, right, for 5 hours a day after practice or after a game? I don't think so. Okay, so that's why there are certain players that wanted this to be in Vegas, because obviously in Vegas things are a lot more open, and you can potentially, there's more room to go out and have fun in Vegas. Let's just leave it at that. So there will be players that will try to push the limits, whether they try to go out and go to a party or whatever it is. So really, it's up to the NBA to, are they going to be strict in enforcing these rules and guidelines? Is there going to be any leniency? We obviously know that there are players that have already tested positive. There will be more players that continue to test positive. What will be the limit? Is there a magic number that if that number gets reached, will the NBA say, okay, we're stopping the games? Or is it just going to be every player that tests positive, they're then going to have to quarantine, and it's going to be up to teams to basically bring on other players off the street, right? Is it just going to be a continual, musical chairs of players coming in and out? Or will there, like I said, be that number where the NBA just says, okay, we're going to have to stop? Because I don't see how at least half the players that play get infected with this virus by the end of the season. To me, it's just inevitable that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And so when you actually look at the 351 players getting tested, let me see this really quick. Let's do simple math. Hold on.
Simple math.
I'm just gonna try to figure out what the percentage of players is for this that they've tested 351. So what that is divided by 20. So they're testing one extra player per team, essentially. So I don't know. They should technically have like a extra roster, right? Like baseball's doing
a standby list.
Yeah, like baseball's starting with 30, and then 2 weeks later making it 28, and then 2 weeks later making it 26, which is the normal amount of players. The NBA, it seems like, hasn't outlined that yet, and they're just going with the 15, right? They're already.
Well, here's a thought. What about the G League players? Now, obviously, it may be a step down in competition, but every NBA team has a G League team, right? And there's at least 15 players on that roster. So how about those guys are just somewhat on standby, because there's only so many free agents that teams can pick up. Obviously, the Lakers most recently just signed J.R. Smith. You have Jamal Crawford that comes to mind, but there are only so many free agents sitting on the couch that are even willing to come back and play. I guarantee you some of these G League players who don't make near the money that they would if they were in the NBA would be more than enticed to go to Orlando and play. Not only would they get a chance to play with the likes of LeBron James and the stars, but their contracts will get a nice raise as well. So maybe that's a thought, is getting the G League players involved.
Yeah, and they're absolutely, by the way, I don't know how you don't outline the fact that for example, you don't use that many D-League guys during a season, especially if you are a great team. But to essentially say that you couldn't use your G-League players would be a little ridiculous, because obviously it adds, you're right, like that extra pool of 10 players to be able to use. A lot of them on two-way contracts anyways, but I mean, you're looking at many players that would help your team. Jared, real quick before we end the podcast, what are your thoughts on J.R. Smith signing with the Lakers? It kind of comes out of nowhere, and in some ways is a replacement of Avery Bradley. How big is his addition after the loss of Avery Bradley?
Yeah, I've been going back and forth on this, because from an offensive standpoint, yes, J.R. Smith is more of a lethal threat, especially from shooting the three ball, than Avery Bradley. But you cannot take away Avery Bradley's defense, the fact that he is basically one of, if not the best defensive stoppers on the Lakers squad. LeBron James, it would free him up so that he wouldn't have to focus all of his attention on, the best offensive player from the other team. So I think from a defensive standpoint, a one-on-one defensive standpoint, it's a big loss for the Lakers, but hopefully they will get, another shooter that can spread the floor. I'm a little concerned that Jared Smith hasn't played in a couple of years, at least professionally. I believe it was since the Cavaliers won the championship. I think that was Jared Smith's last year playing, right? So I think it will definitely take him a minute to get his basketball legs back. But the fact that he has that rapport with LeBron James obviously trusts Jared Smith to a degree. And so I think it will end up being a nice pairing, but I'm curious to see if the Lakers defense tends to struggle a little more because they don't have that defensive stopper in Avery Bradley.
Yeah, I stated too, Avery Bradley, he's a big loss for the Lakers. And unfortunately, it's not due to injury. It is due to just him not wanting to play for various reasons. I'm not going to get into that at all. Doesn't matter. But he's a big loss. And I go back to, I remember the Boston Celtics when Bradley was on the Celtics. And Doc Rivers, I believe it was one of the series against the Miami Heat, the LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh led Miami Heat. He stated, we would have won this series if we had Avery Bradley. So
that's a big statement.
He didn't say, because we didn't have Paul Pierce, or because Kevin Durant, or whatever. Like, he said Avery Bradley. So that to me proves, now Bradley's older than he was then, but I mean, he's been a big part of the Clippers, and he's been a big part of the Lakers ever since he joined them most recently. So when he's on a good team, he thrives, and he was just getting into his three-pointers later in the season too. I remember him making a couple huge shots against the Clippers in their last game that they played against each other, when the Lakers finally did get a win and proved that they could beat the Clippers. Just had to throw that in there. But yeah, it's for sure. I'll tell you this, Jared. Social media has had fun with J.R. Smith joining the Lakers for sure, because obviously everyone remembers. Yes, you're right. The last time J.R. Smith played with LeBron James, one of the games was the game where he didn't call timeout and ran around, and we've seen countless memes. So you've seen Lakers Twitter really be like, all right, this is great, but like none of this extra crap over here, right? So I'd love to see that.
Oh, I guarantee you on a daily basis, the moment J.R. Smith signed that contract, he has been reminded over and over, right? Check the clock. If you're in a pickle, give the ball to LeBron, get the hell out of the way. Let him make a play for you. Guaranteed. He will be reminded of that until the day that he retires, and I guarantee you he will still be reminded of that when he does retire.
Yeah, that's funny. I know. Yeah, he will, and he should be, because it's one of the worst mistakes ever in NBA Finals history. Jared, great podcast today. Plenty of news. We could have talked about so much more, obviously, but just a lot there. I'm sure next week we'll have just as much news to discuss. That NBA will be starting training camps next week. What do we see from that? How many other players are not playing? The MLB is closer and closer to their season starting. And obviously, any more news that comes out of sports in general due to the coronavirus, we will discuss them here. But yeah, for this podcast, I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 Podcast. We'll see you next week, guys.